This video is going to be a bit different. This is going to be the first video in a series highlighting all the tracks I've been able to visit and, more importantly, what they taught me. The first track we're going to go over is going to be HobbyTown Columbus, The Yard. They recently did a large track renovation, making it one of the largest, if not the largest, enclosed indoor track in the southeast, in terms of sheer track size. Before we get into the details, however, in this particular track, I'd like to remind you to like the video, comment what you think of it, and subscribe to the channel if you find yourself returning or just haven't already. Let us begin. Now, I've gone over racing surfaces before, but that was a little while ago, so let's go over this one specifically. I'm no stranger to clay for the most part, at least not anymore, as I have raced at Columbus a few times before. What was new was how sticky and malleable the clay actually was. This was great for grip as it was very high. So high, in fact, that it was possible to run a slipper eliminator in some success. I wasn't the one who did it, but I know someone who did, and he had some success in the stock class. Now, in terms of track surfaces, indoor clay is by far the most popular, at least in the United States. However, that doesn't mean that every track clay is the same. This clay in particular, like I just said, was very sticky. This may have been good for grip, but not so good for appearances. It's almost mandatory you run a chassis protector to avoid having the bottom of your chassis look like it's made out of red Georgia clay. In terms of surface characteristics, it goes something like this. The clay here is a bit more bumpy than it may appear on screen, so you'll have to pick your lines based on these bumps. Luckily, the smoother parts of the track follow the fast line most of the time, so it's not much different from driving on the blue groove on an outdoor loose track surface. This extends to the kind of setup you're going to want going in as well. Here, an extremely low grip setup built for high grip swept dirt will have your car being tossed around like a ragdoll. Nor will it be able to handle the jumps very well. You'll want a decent amount of suspension travel. I already did a guide on tire choice a couple weeks ago, but in case you haven't watched it, let's go over the tire choices you're going to want for this particular track. You're going to want slicks, slicks, and lastly slicks. Seriously though, slick tires are absolutely the way to go for this track. Aqua Compound J Concepts Octagons, M4 Compound Proline Primes, Raw Speed Slicks, aka Slicks, all these will work well for this track. Keep in mind that these tires won't do well on their own. There's a whole process when it comes to tire prep that I'm not going to go into today, as that could be a whole video on its own. Instead, I'll link off to Ryan Harris's video on this exact process. Even though I decided to run the mod class the day of recording this, I was still able to run my 17.5 motor with no timing from the AC without much issue. I was still able to clear every jump, even the large triple in the back right corner, but it wasn't exactly easy to do. I did need a decent run up to do it, but it was possible. The only issue was that depending on where you left the jump, sometimes my buggy would kick up its rear and goes nose down right off the jump. This may have been due to my setup or my own lack of driving skill, but it was something I wanted to mention. I have very little issue with the layout itself. It's a very high risk versus reward type of layout that rewards good consistent driving, something I kind of struggled with at first, to be honest. This is partially because I was using 4-wheel drive wheels on a 2-wheel drive car, pretty much what I had on hand at the time, don't judge me, but also because it took me some time to get to grips with how large the track actually was. It brought to bear an issue I had with 8-skill driving when I still did that. It's somewhat difficult to get your line exactly right the further away you are from your car. Coupled with the fact that certain pillars can block your view of certain parts of the track, it can get a bit dicey. However, I very much doubt there's much they could do to remedy that, as the pillars do pretty much hold the building, so it's just something you're going to have to live with. Another thing about this track in particular is the fact that it was designed to accommodate both 10th and 8th scale cars. Now, I've driven a Kyosho MP10 8th scale buggy on this track, and I have to say, the track was well suited enough to its size for the most part. Now, of course, this wasn't Psycho Nitro Blast or Wicked Weekend levels of size, but it is large enough for a fun club race without much issue. Overall, the layout is very good. I can absolutely see myself taking the 2-hour drive there to do some more large races if they ever come up. I already know one is coming up in December, so I'm looking forward to that. This new track has taught me a few new things to me when it comes to RC racing. First off, I learned a bit more about throttle control. Even though this clay is very high grip, it isn't quite as high grip as say AstroTurf or carpet. Because of this, depending on your setup and where you are on the track, you can either traction roll or spin out. Having decent throttle control was the key to having consistent exits out of corners, at least for 2-wheel drive. 4-wheel drive, you could kinda just send it. The number one thing that this track taught me, or at least tried to teach me, was aerial control. Since the track was much larger, and built in part for 8th scales, the jumps themselves are much larger and allowed the cars to gain a whole lot more air. And because the jumps aren't entirely perfect and swept and even, this is off-road racing, don't you know? Unpredictable things can happen in the air. Being able to correct those irregularities is key to improving your car control skills. Skills I'm still working on. The absolute basic of air control goes something like this. When you accelerate in the air, the nose of the car will come up. When you brake in the air, the nose will come down. As for full-blown control, there's a very simple video from a Mugen driver named Robert Patil who put it in a very concise way. When you want to level your car in the air, point your wheels toward the ground like this. The link to his video will be in the description. Overall, this track is great and I highly recommend you take the time to visit, especially for the finale to the Snap Hard series in December. Currently I'm in 5th place in 2-wheel drive stock buggy and I want to see if I can make the podium. That's all for now. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already by hitting the bright red subscribe button in the bottom right. Furthermore, if you want to support my channel even more, be sure to subscribe to my Patreon where I post updates to my videos. If you want to know what I'm up to, that's where I am. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, Lucas Tarka, RC World Discord server, and Casey Nix. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.